which is also very anticipated. All participants who have been in the first training week in April, remember we had already a very interesting session on monitoring and evaluation in the context of qualifications frameworks. And we had then another colleague, it was Eleanor. And today we have her colleague, Rebecca. And by the way, we also have Zahra. Please, Zahra, can you stand up? Zahra has very actively contributed also to develop this training module and guideline, and has been participating also in the community of practice meetings that were organized around this topic to come up to this guideline. The floor is yours. I think everybody is very interested in this topic.
Thank you very much, Eduarda, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you an introduction to Module 7. This is a very high-level introduction to monitoring and evaluation. We will go through some of the key concepts which underline the discipline and the approach, and then also share with you some of the tools and templates that have been developed for use in the rollout of the ACQF, and then also ask you during the session to please complete a Google form so that we can collect some feedback from you about the monitoring of the NQF in your own countries and the feasibility of collecting that information so that we can be sure once the indicators are developed for the rollout of the ACQF that it will be possible for you to share that information with us. So this is an overview of the training manual, which you will be able to see and has been shared with you so far. This short introduction now will get through mostly up to section 1 to section 4, and the rest can be read in your own time when you have a copy of the training manual. So these are the key learning outcomes that come out of the full manual, which you can read there on the screen. But in essence, it's to introduce to you some of the key concepts about monitoring and evaluation, what makes them different, why each of them are important, and then the indicators that have been put forward as possible ways to measure the implementation of your own NQF, or in the design of it and development, and then ultimately the ACQF. So in terms of some key concepts, when we talk about monitoring and evaluation, they are two separate different activities, and we describe them differently because monitoring is a routine activity which is usually undertaken as part of normal project management, and you're monitoring to be sure that things are moving along as planned, and the information is collected on a routine basis, and it can usually be done by a project manager or an individual within an organization. And then evaluation, differently, is a periodic assessment, which means it takes place at fixed points in time during the implementation of a particular policy or framework. So before we go on to the next slide, I want to ask, is it possible those of you that are online can move to the chat in the call and just type into the chat, what do you think makes monitoring and evaluation different to each other? Is anybody in front of their computer that can type in the chat? Does anybody want to give it a chance? Or take a try at it? Yeah, James here says the one is ongoing while the other is once off. That's close. Anybody else? Yeah, evaluation looks at outcomes. It's something that looks at the longer term results of an initiative or a policy. And monitoring is regular while evaluation is in-depth. So monitoring can also be in-depth, but evaluation can combine much more different types of information and data that you collect to be able to look at something. But most importantly, monitoring supports evaluation. So the two support each other and they can't be done in isolation of each other. For a good evaluation, you need good monitoring data. And to be sure that your NQF is implemented well, you need feedback from any evaluation about what are the things you need to improve. So I've spoken to some of this already, but this provides you much more detail about the differences between monitoring and evaluation. And what you can, some of the ones that are important to pull out here is that when you are doing your monitoring, which is the early stages of the work on the development or implementation of an NQF, and then ultimately at the ACQF level, is what you're looking at is whether things are happening as planned. So if we set out to develop our NQF to focus on very specific aspects, and we imagine that by a certain period in time, we would have all of the qualifications registered and the learning outcomes explained, we're monitoring against a work plan to say we imagine by the time we get to a certain point, we should be able to report on a regular basis about certain things. And if you're watching your monitoring, you know when there's a problem. Maybe you're not getting the information fast enough. Maybe the information is incomplete. Maybe the documents are unclear. Monitoring will tell you that. And then your evaluation will look at what your overall results are. So if we're looking towards developing an NQF, which is focused on mobility and inclusion, the evaluation, when you undertake an evaluation, that will be able to tell you, are we moving towards those goals? What do we think mobility is? What do we think articulation is? What do we think referencing is? How should it look? And have we achieved that? What are the differences? Or what are the obstacles to being able to do that? And then the other important thing is that when you plan to do an evaluation, you have to budget for it separately to make sure you have sufficient money to do it. And evaluation also uses specific criteria. So we have guidelines which tell us what's good, what's weak, what's strong, what needs attention. It's not just a routine process of collecting different kinds of information. So why really is M&E important in the context of qualifications framework? So why I'm telling why it's important, why we're talking about it here today. And that's really to assess your results and then also to generate knowledge and share lessons that are relevant. So there are some evaluations that have been done of different qualifications frameworks around the world, and they give us feedback on what are things that have prevented implementation, what have been some of the barriers, what have been some of the things which have helped. And so when we get that information, we know that when you move to another country and another member state is working on developing their NQF or expanding it, they have information from elsewhere to say, these are the things you must be really careful about, because if you don't think about these things, things won't go according to plan. So I'll go through this slide very quickly, but what it tells you is that when you do monitoring and evaluation, you're not only doing an activity, you're also doing it as part of a much bigger system, which has many different things together. So, and each of these things have to happen to be able to have a good and strong M&E system. So the first is to develop a results framework, which we're going to look at just now. The other is to develop some indicators, and we have some draft indicators to share with you to think about how you can collect the information. So in your own countries, where do you find different kinds of information about qualifications frameworks? And then to talk also about how you can share and use that information. So everything is underpinned by what's described as a results chain. And what a results chain does is it outlines from the beginning the resources we need, and that's people or money or documents or information, what we're going to do with it. So action, and then what the results are. So it could be training individuals like the focus of this week. And when we leave today, and the gentleman who opened the session this morning spoke about enhanced knowledge and skills, and going away and coming back and bringing reflections. So knowing what have we done afterwards, with what we've learned here this week. And then in terms of your very long-term impact, you see here that your M&E systems have been developed and your NQFs have been strengthened. So indicators, which are the basis of your monitoring. So these are your signposts, which tell you, are we moving on track, or what are the problems with the way things are being rolled out, are sentences and statements which need to be very clearly defined and explained. And the indicators we have put together as draft indicators for the NQF and the ACQF, which I'll share with you just now, also have suggestions about how often you should collect them, where the information might exist, and what you could use it for. So these are the things to think about when you develop the indicators and use them in your own implementation of your monitoring of your NQF. So we know in each of the member states, the respective NQFs are at different stages of implementation. We heard about the Botswana example, and there's been others earlier in the week. So some people might be at block 3, other people might be at block 1, and other people might even be at block 5 of those member states that are here in the room. This slide here shows you about the different activities that are undertaken as part of doing monitoring and evaluation for the NQF at country level. So when you go back and you develop your NQF, or you expand it and you start to think through, how am I going to see how well this is meeting its objectives? How am I going to monitor what's going on, and how am I going to know when something needs to be changed? There are a set of different activities which need to happen for you to be able to do that. And one that is very important is being sure that you have other individuals, either in the qualifications authority or the respective organizations within your member state, who agree that monitoring and evaluation is important, and they can see the value of it. People have been typing very interesting comments in the chat bar about why M&E are important. People need to be able to understand that so that they can be doing M&E well. If people don't think it's important and they don't really care about it, the information's not collected well, it doesn't give us the answers that we need. So you need to have the demand for M&E. Who's going to use the information, and then also build people's skills to be able to do that. And when you're able to look in detail at the training module, there's a lot of additional information there which helps on building skills. Then further along, you can see also to think about how you're going to collect your data. So where is that information? Have you got a higher education management information system? Is the information held within the country level qualifications authority? Where can you get it from? How fast do you think you're going to achieve something? So how many RQFs do you imagine you want your NQF to reference to, and things like that? Then to set your targets and to use your information for decision making. Here you can see this slide shows you about how you can develop capacity to do M&E. So in the initial stages of developing the NQF or applying M&E, you may not have a person who does M&E as their full-time job. It might be something that has to be done by one person as part of their other work on a day-to-day basis. These are the things to think about how to strengthen those people's ability to do their work. This is one of, I think, Eduardo's most important slides. We spent a lot of time revising this slide together as part of a group, which is what we call the results framework for the ACQF. And I'll show you a separate one for the NQF just after this. What this results framework does is it explains how we think we're going to get to our long-term impact. So the ultimate result we want to move towards in the development of the ACQF. And you'll see at the bottom, your white blocks explain the different activities that need to happen to get the process moving. Your red blocks explain your deliverables or your results, so what has happened, and your blue blocks explain how things are moving or what the changes that we are seeing as a result of the work that we've done. So we're working through the ACQF so that there is enhanced transparency and comparability of qualifications, also that there's mobility and portability, and there's multiple recognition of multiple pathways and cooperation across the region and even beyond Africa. And you see that the long-term goal that we've worked towards is one of saying that what the ACQF will achieve is transparency and comparability of qualifications on the continent, which enables inclusion and mobility and contributes to economic development. So I can see some people are posting comments on the chat. I think, let me try get through the presentation and then maybe we can go back to them after this. So the NQF results framework, which is one which may be more directly relevant to you, depending on where you are in your own countries at the moment, shows you at a country level, so at a lower kind of one step down when we think about what needs to happen to be able to move towards the goal of our NQF, is these different activities. So the activities for the NQF are not too dissimilar to those from the ACQF in your white blocks you see. But what we identify here as our results, so the activities that have happened or the consequences of those activities, is that we have quality assured programs and qualifications. And then also we have a review report about the NQF design and implementation. And then the outcomes, so these are the changes that have happened as a result of developing and implementing the NQF, are there in the blue blocks. As you can see that there's trust, which is established. That trust and engagement means that qualifications respond to industry needs. So we're not working in the vacuum of the changing society and context around us. And then also that by implementing the NQF, you will see there's national and regional mobility, portability, and recognition, and also enhanced transparency and comparability. So some of the blue blocks overlap with the blue blocks or the outcomes, which are also in the ACQF results framework, which I've just shared with you. But this diagram here provides the basis for the rest of what is proposed for the M&E of the NQF and the ACQF. So this is how we're going to achieve our goals of access, inclusion, participation, and mobility. There's very specific things we need to watch. There's very specific things we need to do. And there's things that we're expecting to happen. And if they don't happen, we know that something needs to be reconsidered. After having identified and developed your results framework, so what I've just shared with you, we need to then be able to think about what's the kind of information that we collect to be able to monitor the implementation of the NQF. And that information can be stuff which already exists elsewhere in your country, like in statistical agencies or in higher education departments or in skills bodies and things like that. So it's not everything you need to collect being brand new, but there is also information which needs to be collected for the first time. And that's information you might need to collect from an individual or a system. So it's not yet analyzed and you're collecting it for the first time. And you could also get it through interviews, observations, workshop assessments. So when you fill in your assessments later and you might give feedback on the work this week and what you've learned, that's primary data. And Eduarda and the rest of the team will take that away and look at your feedback and analyze it to say, when we reconvene for another training session, these are the things people may not have understood. These are the things people thought should be longer, shorter, things like that. And then your secondary data is information which already exists, which you can be able to draw on to understand how things are happening, what's happening in the design and implementation of your NQF. So just also those of you who can engage on the chat, if you think back to your own country context, what secondary data do you think or exists that can be used when you want to monitor your NQF? What information is available? Or where could you get it from? Here we've got employment rates. Anybody else want to suggest any other information that you think you could get, that you don't have to collect for the first time, and where that information might be? GDP, graduation statistics. So in terms of GDP, you can sometimes be able to get that data through periodic statistical agencies, and that'll give you an insight into what's going on in different parts of your economy and potentially what sectors may need more or less attention. Qualifications rates would tell you what the progression is that's going through your higher education system, what the throughput is. Labor statistics, that's another important one. You might also want information about demographics, so gender, changes in employment trends, potentially different professions, data about how many of the professionals employed in a particular sector may have qualified outside of your member state. All of that kind of information may already be available in other sources of data in your own country. So we spoke a little bit earlier about indicators and what kind of indicators could be used to collect your information. So there is a Google form, which Erica would have sent you by your email, or there's a QR code, which was sent, that people can be able to click on and answer the Google form directly. If you can just take two minutes now from your laptop in front of you or your phone and just answer the questions that come up there.
Rebecca, apologies to jump in. The second QR code is for the survey. The first one is for the
document. Okay.
With all the details, but the survey is the second QR code, and I put the link in the chat also.
Great. So if you can click on the link in the chat or the QR code on the right-hand side, that will give you a direct link to a form. The form is multiple choice, and it'll take you less than 3 minutes to answer. Please just literally click through it now, so that when we go back, we can be able to see the feasibility of the indicators that we've put together. Can people engage in front of them right now? Okay, well, those of you who've started the survey can finish it up. I'm going to move on just in the interests of time to share with you what will become the reporting tool, which you can use to submit information about the indicators that will be included for, or put forward, possible indicators for the NQF monitoring, and then ultimately the ACQF. So this document will be changed into a tool and will be shared with you in the 3 languages for you to be able to report on it. And the first page here describes how you can use the tool and each of the different tabs that are contained in it. And then these are the indicators here, some of them that we've put forward for measuring. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you look at an example here, number of RPL applications processed, so line 7, you can see that the description for that indicator is how many applications for RPL have been finalized within the reporting period. So if you collect information every 6 months, then every 6 months you provide the information about how many RPL applications have been processed. The suggestion here is that that's reported at member state level, and we would want each of the member states to share where that information can be found in your country. What's the name of the database? What's the name of the agency that may have it? That will go in column E. And then column F shows you the way the kinds of things you would be measuring. So you can see here, you measure your answers could be on a scale of 1 to 5. So progress towards the development of an NQF. And there was a slide earlier on in my presentation which split it across 5 different blocks. So where you are in the 5. And moving further along, you will see that there are some other fields that we ask you to populate because you will know the answers to the situation in your own country in terms of how people will be collecting and using the information. So who in your own member state would collect the information? And we said that could be qualifications, graduation rates, GDP, labor market participation, who could collect the information, who would check that there's no mistakes, who would put the information together, so collate it. So if you take it from many different places, put it into one document, and then who would analyze the information and report it, and who would use it. So who's the person who would look at this and say, why is it that we have 2,000 applications for RPL in the system and we're only processing 100 every month? What's happening here? What's the problem? Who's going to be the person who's using the data? This is the prototype that's going to be shared with you once it's been programmed a little bit more. And it's just separated into the member state indicators, and then at a lower level focusing on the actual specific NQF. This would be the digital tool, and you would see here you could enter some information that goes here. And then further along, it would give you more information that you would be able to put in, and then it would give you either specific answers which track your progress and show you what things may look like, where things are fast, where things are slow, the kind of things that you need to be watching for. So James, we did put some examples here to show you, but I don't see them. Yeah. So after you have been able to monitor and look at what has been happening with your qualifications framework over a period of time, you can then do the periodic assessment of the evaluation. You can do an evaluation which looks at how things have moved on using your monitoring data and whether things are doing well or whether things are moving slowly and what needs more attention. And there's 4 different kinds of evaluation that are explained on the slide that you undertake at different points of implementing and planning your NQF. So you would be doing these four evaluation activities at different points in time. And to do that, when you undertake an evaluation, you go through a detailed planning process. And that means that you will go over some of the things we've discussed so far. And that is that you clarify your results framework. So the schematic I showed you with the different colored blocks, you go back to that and look at it in light of your own country context. How many of these are still relevant? Is this correct? Is there something here which needs to change? Because when you're evaluating your NQF, you're evaluating it against the results framework. If the results framework is wrong or it doesn't represent your own country context, the evaluation will not be useful for you. So you need to clarify the results framework, and then you identify your evaluation questions. So what are the things that you want to understand about the development and implementation. You identify where you're going to collect the information and who can give it to you. So those are the data that might exist in systems, or the people you need to interview, or the documents you need to collect. Then you need a timeline. So how much time will you spend on your evaluation? Is it going to happen in 6 months? Is it going to happen in 1 year? After 1 year, when will you do your next evaluation? How will you use your recommendation? Things like that. And in the training module 7 is a lot of attachments which have templates for how you do these specific things. So an evaluation plan and a terms of reference. A terms of reference in this situation is where something you're going to write down to outline how you want somebody to undertake your evaluation and the things you need to know. And you would need to put that together based on what you've wanted to be done. So I just want to finish the presentation and then we can look at the information. So just to wrap up on our discussion and what I've gone through so far, I know it's been quite a lot of content to take in and process, but this is really what we've covered. And these are the things you can go back and look at in more detail. In terms of the Google form, you answered. So the feasibility of collecting the information, you can see here it's gone into the bar chart. So when we look at the responses, and I think the total responses we had were, does it say? Yeah, so you can see here, if you look at the stage of development of the NQF, for most people, it's already being collected, and only a very small number, it's not possible to collect information about the stage of development. The number of qualifications referenced to the NQF, for most people, that information is already being collected. If you scroll down here, the extent to which the implementation is costed and progress is tracked against expenditure, we get a different picture here. You can see only a few people are collecting it already, and more people are saying that it's easy to collect or it's difficult to collect, but the collection is not actually happening at all. And there's responses here that we say that it's not possible to collect, which means that probably that information doesn't exist, or it's not being compiled in a way that helps us to be able to report on that costing and implementation.
Rebecca, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
They're displaying the results. If you just follow the slides, we've done it quickly for you on the side.
Yeah, we can see them.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, James. When you see here, if you look at the number of youth and adults who've accredited the qualifications, you can see we have a similar picture there. For the most common part of the pie chart indicates that for some people it's easy to collect and other people it's difficult to collect. But even if it's easy to collect, it's not already being collected in most examples. So this gives you a sense of the fact that there might be available information that you can use for your NQF, but you're not actually collecting it now. And so it's a matter of the activity. And then in other instances, there might be information which is not possible to collect. So where it is not possible to collect, that's where there will need to be further work done in collaboration with Eduarda and other people involved in this process to decide what do we do when the information is just not possible to collect, because it's not useful to give you an indicator where the information is just not possible to collect. Is there a different way we could get that information? What needs to happen? Then looking here at your outbound mobility ratio, the majority of people here are saying it would be difficult to collect that information. So for most people, that's difficult to collect. But if we can't follow the outbound mobility ratio, we don't we're not able to accurately assess in our results framework whether we're achieving mobility and inclusion on the continent, which we identified as one of the long-term impacts for the ACQF and the NQF. So this is just a very quick introduction into both thinking about the information that we need to collect, why monitoring and evaluation is important, and what we need to go back and think about further. So the presentation was as much for you as it was also for us to be able to collect information and know that when we move forward with the M&E module and the training, what are some of the things that we need to consider further.